In the last section, we talked about writing your work experience, doing things like using active verbs, making sure you were using bullet points. On the screen here, you'll see what most people do. They'll give you very basic details, things like serving customers, sweeping up, etc. This is how not to do it. You have to find a balance between keeping it short and concise, but also actually telling me what it is you did as part of that work experience, as part of that role. Now, the way to do this is through using STAR, a technique that you can use to talk about your experiences. STAR is a simple acronym, just stands for situation, where you describe the situation you were using, whatever skill you're trying to demonstrate, the task, what were you trying to achieve, and then the action, probably the most important part, what you did and how you did it. And the how is really important. Most people forget the how part. And then you finish with the result, something that's quantifiable. What happened as a result of what you did? And if we use STAR on what we had previously, we get something like this, and you'll see it's already quite a lot more impactful. We quantify things, talking about being part of a team of 7, serving 300 customers a week. We're being specific, almost specific enough that we might feel a bit embarrassed at first, but this is the level of detail we need. We talk about the specific skills we've used and demonstrated, customer service, working flexibly, some of the awards that we might have achieved. All of this gives that extra impact and detail that tells someone reading it what I really did as part of that experience. When you're writing these, it is really important the language you're using. First, try and quantify things, give me numbers. It gives a level of credibility to what you're writing, actually shows that you know what you're talking about. Similarly, use those active verbs that we talked about previously. Things like organised, arranged. Try and avoid do and did. I did this, I did that. Tell me specifically what you did. You analysed, you arranged, you answered questions, this kind of thing. Again, it's more credible and it engages the reader a lot more. Another thing to think about when you're writing a CV is the skills that you're talking about. What a lot of employers are doing is looking for specific skills, evidence that you can do specific things for them. This will be in the job description or the person specification. So put those skills into your CV, either into the personal profile, if that's one of the things you're using, but definitely into your work experience sections, and back those up with examples. This makes it really much easier for your CV to stand out. The reason this language and these skills are so important to talk about is mainly because of how companies recruit. Imagine that you've got 50 CVs to go through in the space of an hour. How are you going to do it? This is how employers do it. They use something called a selection grid. So on the left-hand side, they've got the names of everybody that's applied, and along the top, they've got all the key skills that they've actually asked for, lifted usually directly from a person specification. And for each of these skills, what they do is give you a score. Give everybody a score along those skills. I've used 1 to 4 here, it might be 1 to 5, 1 to 10, doesn't really matter. All those scores are then added up, and the top scores are the ones that get invited to interview. I said in one of the previous parts of this playlist that you've got to think about a CV as a way to get an interview, not a job, and this is essentially what I meant. This is a little bit like a game. The goal of the game is to get that top score so that you're invited to interview. This is the board you're playing on, these are the rules that you're playing by. So what you need to be doing is using the things I've spoken about in these videos and then essentially scoring yourself, scoring your CV. And if you can be sure that for each of the key skills these employers are asking for, you're getting that 4 or 5 or whatever it might be, then you can be reasonably sure that you are getting to the next stage. And if you do that, you put yourself in a really strong position. Because one of the things you've got to remember is you're competing against other people, you're competing against all of the other CVs, but only about 25% of CVs or applications get through to the next stage. That might sound daunting, But think of it the other way. If you get good at this, and you can through practice, then you get rid of most of your competition in the first stage. It's a little bit like an opportunity. And where do you get these examples? Where do you get this ammunition to talk about? You can get it from anywhere. Obviously, part-time work, any work experience you've got is great. That's what we look for first. But anything that you have done is valid, whether it's sports, we saw how that could be useful previously, but volunteering, your academic context, placements, internships, yes, great, but online learning, caring responsibilities, mentoring, everything is valid. It can be really easy for you to sit there and think, I don't have anything to put in a CV. I promise you, the very fact that you've gone to university makes that untrue. You always have things to talk about. Please don't feel like you don't have those things. Towards the end of the CV, when you've finished your work experience, your voluntary experience, this is where other things go, your activities, any awards you've got or interests you want to talk about. These are still quite useful, things like societies or sport you've been part of, any awards you've got, but they are, we usually say, are nice to have. If you're running out of space, remember you've got a hard limit of 2 pages, this is the first thing to go. If you can fit it in, great, but if you are struggling for space, this is what you cut. And then we finish with references. All we really need is references available on request as a simple line. That will suffice for most employers. We don't need detailed references on a CV. The reason is they will contact references when they've decided whether or not to give you a job, at which point your CV is almost irrelevant, so you don't really need to put them on a CV. It is important to think about who you're going to ask as a reference. People who can confirm essentially your education and your experience, so current or previous employers, past or current lecturers, academic advisors, all of these people are valid, but start to think about who you're going to ask and make sure once you've decided to actually ask them before you get to that stage. Which brings us to the end of the CV section of this playlist. Now, if you still feel like you need a little bit of support, if you want your CV checking, please get onto the CV pathway. You can access this through Career Connect. There is a QR code on the screen. This will allow you to access all of our other support around CVs, including booking onto an actual appointment with a CV advisor if you want to get your CV checked. Can be really useful. But the next thing we want to talk about will be cover letters. And with that, we've finished the CV section of this playlist. Thanks again very much for watching. We really hope that's been helpful. If you can again help the channel grow by liking and subscribing, we'd really appreciate that. Helps us reach more students. And we'll round off this playlist by looking at cover letters, what they are, how to write them.